Hi everyone, I'm Amy and this is my preferred opponent and life partner,
Yes.
Maggie. And together we are ThinkerThemer and we are, well, known for our thinking and our theming. I'm all about the mechanics and Maggie is all about the theme, and together this is how we review board games. Today we are doing a special list of sorts. It is all about two-player only games. So
when we believe are the best two-player only games.
Two-player only games. So not just games that play well at two players, but these are games that have been specifically designed for two players. The head-to-head battle, the battle of wits between two players. And this is like a category of games that, in terms of our journey into gaming, probably the last frontier for us, one of the last frontiers.
We're one of those couples that didn't really used to play two-player games until the whole global pandemic forced us to only be able to play with one another.
It wasn't until we got locked in the house together that we decided
for 2 years.
We should probably find a way to play just the two of us. Before that, it was always with our play group, which is generally 3 or 4 players. So we were always playing big Euros. And I've had a few two-player games that are very close to my heart. I grew up playing chess. So two-player games were kind of always in my household. Whereas you, because you love the theme and the story, it's like much harder to get that in a small box experience.
They don't tend to lend themselves to really fully immersive thematic type style gaming experiences. No, they tend to be more abstract type games.
So spoiler alert, Maggie's are some slightly newer games. But overall, I think we've just gotten more into two-player games. We've covered so many of them in our series Small Talk now that we feel very confident in making this list.
It's an educated, informed opinion.
Yes, but our preferences are incredibly different, I think.
As you would expect.
You would expect. So if you know my gaming preference as well, you can probably guess that I like quite a tensely competitive two-player experience. I like there to be just like the full-on interaction, not necessarily mean, but definitely very kind of aggressive style play. Not mean, just aggressive.
Yeah, really, I prefer mean then.
Yeah, they both sound bad. But I like it to be like very much a head-to-head battle where you're also trying to think ahead. I really enjoy games that make you, like chess, think a few steps ahead and plan out like your next move. So that's the criteria for me.
I don't enjoy that as much. I think for me it's about, one, the artwork often. So like the aesthetic, the table presence. Do I enjoy, what it looks like, what it feels like? And then probably an element of discovery. So if I'm either discovering either like in terms of the gameplay, if there's no way for me to predict what's kind of going to happen, but I get to build something, I enjoy that. Or even discovery in terms of being able to like try different strategies. I don't really usually enjoy having to like get in your head and be like, what's Amy going to do, and then kind of that Machiavellic, I don't even know if that's the right word, but that sort of like, calculating sort of thing. It's like, I just like to figure out a little, it's like fun little strategy thing here. Is this going to work for this puzzle?
But having said that, I think, the ones on your list, which I know what is on your list, are still very head-to-head competitive.
And I think that's probably more an indication of the two-player only genre.
But there are, of course, I'm going to give another spoiler, no cooperative games on this list. Like, we are both...
We're not,
That's another thing to know about us. We love some competition, and so both of our lists are very competitive.
Yes.
Anyway, let's get into some games. The one game that actually is consistent on our list, but not in our top 5.
No, so our honourable mention.
Our honourable mention is a game that we both do agree on. It's our number 6, Watergate. Now, Watergate is by Matthias Kramer. And this game, interestingly, it takes place in a time of American political history during the Nixon administration. And one player is going to play as the Nixon administration. The other player is going to play as the journalist trying to build up enough evidence to take down the Nixon administration. Now, this is a context that didn't really appeal to me as a theme. It's not that I need a great theme, but because it also involves asymmetry, I was like, maybe I'm going to have to learn a lot about, the political background here. And so just never jumped out to us. And I think that we waited way too long to play this game.
Well, if anything, I feel like then it was a real delight when we did manage to play it. Also because we played a couple of other, also like 2-player head-to-head law style games where you are technically, there is that asymmetry. And we had a little bit of a feel for what that could be. And our complaints with those ones were they didn't actually feel asymmetric enough. You were just kind of this tug of war for this one tracker to try and go one way or the other. This feels like true asymmetry because you are the events that you're getting to play, the actual things that you're achieving or trying to move on the board are different. So
so what you're trying to do as the Nixon administration is to really just hang in there and not get caught out by the journalists. And the way that you're going to be trying to win the game is there's a bit of a tug of war going on where you're trying to pull these tokens between the two of you, but also key pieces of evidence. And on the other part of the board is a network, one of those old school detective pin boards where they're putting up pieces of string and connecting the dots between all the pieces of the puzzle, who did what, when. But what the journalist is trying to do is collect evidence to place on the board. It has to be the right color to go in the right place to connect the Nixon administration to 2 key people that were involved in the scandal. If you can do that as the journalist, then you win the game. As the Nixon administration, you're really trying to take those pieces of evidence in order to get rid of them. In order
bury
to
that.
Bury that evidence. And you do that by placing those same pieces of evidence on the board, but facing down, or so it shows just like this blank piece of like black evidence that actually just blocks a space that the journalist can use to connect them to these key contacts. You win the game by dragging what's called the momentum token over to your side of the tug of war 5 times. So each round you're trying to bring it over to your side. If you can do that 5 times, then you win the game. So the journalist is also trying to stop the Nixon administration from dragging that momentum token at the same time as trying to gather evidence and pin it on the board. And the way that this all plays out is through the use of cards. So each player has a unique deck of cards that is going to allow them to do either 2 things: burn the card or use the card to basically move the evidence and the tokens up and down the tug of war track, or play the event on the card and do these one-off powerful actions that then require you to destroy the card from the game. So you're trying to work out the timing of when to pull off these big events and when to just use the card to kind of get the resources that you need. Really interesting.
It felt actually really thematic as well. Like, as a journalist, you're just this constant struggle to try and get those pieces of evidence, and you never feel like you have enough time. And, then Nixon will go and secure someone's favor or silence, and then they start turning over, and you're like, I'm never going to get
you feel
this.
like but that's so close to, I'm sure, what it felt like so close, but not being able to just get the right piece of evidence that you needed. Whereas the Nixon administration, the evidence starts piling up. So every round you're adding more and more evidence, and you actually feel like, how am I going to survive this?
Scandal is going to come out.
This is just, and I guess at that point he resigned.
Very clever.
But really clever game. It didn't make either of our top 5s, but it's certainly like a fabulous game that I would recommend, highly recommend. That is Watergate.
So let's get into both our top 5, starting with me. I'll start. So my number 5 is a game called Fairy Trails. This is by Uwe Rosenberg. And in this game, we're playing as, there's 2 different camps. So I believe it's fairies and gnomes. But really, it's just like pink and yellow. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to kind of connect. You're creating these sort of paths, and you're going to be placing these beautiful little beads that then when you manage to close your circuit, sort of close your path and kind of create your little closed community, then you get to claim those little tokens, or kind of like your houses that you've been building along the way. The beauty of this game is that it's actually, again, it's a game that is fairly abstract. There's not really a lot of theme into. Did you say fairy? Very abstract.
No, I said very. It's very abstract.
Very abstract. There's not really a lot of theme, but I do love the the visuals of it. I love the artwork of it, even though some people have had issues with, because you've got all of these paths that are kind of crossing over one another. Sometimes it can be difficult to kind of gauge how they connect, but you're going to be connecting all these beautiful little tiles. I love how tactile the little houses are. And it can get quite mean, because ultimately, as you're connecting things, you're kind of taking turns putting these tiles, and obviously, you know, one person's going to be collecting the pink, the other one's going to be collecting the yellow, and then sometimes when you get a card, you go, oh, I can't really use that for myself, but maybe I can mess up Amy's beautiful little. Yeah.
Not always when you can't use it yourself either. Sometimes it's just better to try and slow your opponent down.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's just plain fun to be nasty, and that it's like, oh.
And it's a little bit like Carcassonne. Like, some person's trying to close off something and you're trying to give them a fork in the road. That means that they can never, or you're trying to build out their town. So that they can never close it. That's a similar idea distilled down into a much smaller experience.
I also love that it can feel a little bit like gambling, because you can kind of get really ambitious with how big you make the circuit and then go, I may never be able to close this. Or, you know, you might sort of keep it safe and just be closing a lot of, obviously closing a lot of little ones and getting your little stones. Because I believe it's like the first one to get to a set number of those little houses and stones wins the game. So it's a race, essentially. But how satisfying is it when, if you have gambled and gone for that really big one and you do manage to close it, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, game over or almost over.
Yeah, this game really surprised me. It was much better than I expected to be. As an Uwe Rosenberg fan, it just seemed like, such a departure in this small, seemingly like very simple game. But if you're just highly competitive, if you like a game like Carcassonne, this is just... it just scratches that itch, and it's like, it's really like, I don't know, we had a lot of fun with it. We've had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
It's one that you could take traveling really easily. It's a really small box.
Yeah, you can take, but you wouldn't even have to take the box. I'd put it in the Ziploc bag and just take the cards and the little beads.
It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's by Paper Plane Games.
So that's Fairy Trails, my number 5.
Now, if you follow the channel, my number 5 is probably not going to be a surprise to anyone. It is the game Devon. I'm like, why is Amy still talking about Devon? This game is such... I don't know, I just have such warm feelings towards this game. It is one of many in the GIPF series, that's GIPF series of games, where they're all abstract games with a slightly different take on them. Devon is one of those games, but this is the one that I really, really love. It's so simple. All you're going to be doing is playing as either white or black, like in checkers or chess, and you're going to be playing this game out on a board that has basically triangle shapes. But at the start of the game, all the pieces are going to start on the board, and then the way that you move around on this game is to jump on top of other pieces. And if you can jump on top of your opponent's pieces, you're going to be able to control that stack, i.e., your opponent no longer owns that piece until they put one of their pieces back on top of that stack, and now it's their stack, and so on and so forth. But the tricky thing is you can only move the number of spaces, or you can only travel as far as the stack is tall. So at the beginning you can only move one piece onto another piece, but then it becomes a 2 stack, and then you have to move 2 spaces. And so you're constantly counting out how you're going to move around this board, and when the stack gets too high, it becomes impossible, and then you've got to move on and try and create some other stacks. But what I really love about this game are the Devon pieces in this game. So there are 3 red pieces, they're beautiful resin pieces that stack on top of each other, 3 red pieces in the game that you have to be connected to at all times. If you somehow isolate yourself and you're no longer connected to this, or your opponent removes the only piece that was connecting you to one of those red Devon pieces, you fall off the board. And that can have very hilarious consequences. Actually, that might be a running theme in some of my game picks, when that red piece is removed and half the board gets wiped off, and it's almost like you're restarting from scratch sometimes.
Yeah, there's a landslide. Like, to me, it always feels like, this beautiful castle that you've been building, all of a sudden it's just like someone just thumped all over it, or the whole
But it's hilarious. I find it hilarious when it happens to me. But also in Devon, you should be able to see it coming.
Yeah.
And you should be able to anticipate your next couple of moves and watch out for areas where your opponent can take your pieces. What do I love about this game? I love that it's so simple that, I never have to look at the rule book. I will forever know the rules of this game. And I often have it lying around when you've got any level of gamer, because it's so easy to teach. But then what I love about it is I can be sitting kind of across the room watching two people play a game, and I can see a couple of moves ahead and what's about to happen. And then it happens, and then everyone's like, oh, my pieces fell off the board. And I love it. I adore it. But yeah, this is, if you're into abstract games, I highly recommend this one. Check out Devon, my number 5.
My number 4 is a beautiful little game called The Fox in the Forest. Now, this game is actually a trick-taking game. Trick-taking is not known for its thematic immersion, but I don't know why I have a soft spot for trick-taking. And in The Fox in the Forest, it's just such a cute, such a nice concept of, it's not just about trying to win the most tricks. You've got all these different suits of cards and, sort of like a range of numbers, and some of them have unique abilities, so that can actually kind of break or shift something about that trick that you're playing. Those cards actually do have some illustrations, which is nice, because from a thematic point,
it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, it is really nice. The cards I actually quite enjoy. It's really only cards. But in this game, what you're going to be trying to do is you're going to try to win a specific number of tricks. So with those suits, just like a lot of the trick taking stuff, there's going to be a lead suit, and then it's whoever has the highest, is able to play the highest card of that suit wins the trick. But in this one, they also have a trump suit that then means that can trump whatever the lead suit is. So that you always have almost like a backup potentially of a different type of card that can also overpower your opponent. The cute thing about this is that, again, as I said, it's not just about winning the most. They have this very specific scale of how many points you can get, depending on whether you get, 0 to 3, which is actually really good. That's one of the most points that you can get. And that's like humble. So if you're humble and you win nothing or up to 3, then you get the most points. And then at the other extreme, if you win too many, I believe it's like 10 through to 13.
You're greedy.
You're too greedy, and you actually then get 0 points. So you kind of go bust. And then in the middle, there's all sorts of different balances. So the interesting thing about this game is not just whether or not, it's the decisions of, do I want to win this trick or not? And this is where I think the sly fox element comes in, of trying to figure out what number of tricks is my opponent going for, and then where do I want to place myself so that I can get a good amount of points and not kind of overdo it or underdo it. So I've really enjoyed this one. This is
I'm convinced it's on Maggie's list because I'm terrible at it. I just cannot get a good thing going with this game.
It's so rare for Amy to lose to me, and so whenever there's a game,
surprised it's not your number 1.
Yeah, and whenever there's a game that I consistently win, like this is one of those where I can see the frustration, and it's more like a hilarious frustration of you kind of going, what?
It's just because I understand what I need to do. I seem to not be able to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. I really do enjoy this game too. We've had a lot of laughs with this game. Yeah. It does come in now a duet version, but that's cooperative. It's co-op. So the original, the competitive, is the best for us.
Yes. Yeah. So that's my number 4, The Fox in the Forest.
My number 4 is from little-known designer, just kidding, Rina Knizia, and the game is Lost Cities. Now, Lost Cities is a fairly abstract card game, so even though there is a very loosely pasted on theme about being explorers, I'm just going to talk about it in terms of numbers and colors, because that's all it really is. And in this game, you're going to start with a handful of 8 cards, both you and your opponent. There are in the deck 5 different colors, each that have numbers 2 to 10. So the lowest value is the 2, the highest value is the 10, and you're basically going to be playing them in front of you. You're going to have the opportunity to play each color if you want. But the catch is that if you start a run of cards, you need to get to 20 points just by simply summing them in order for them to score in the positive for you. So everything above 20 points is going to score you points.
Yeah.
You'll get the 20, or you might get more than 20. But there are also wager cards in this game, which essentially take the place of the one that can be played as your first card in any run of cards. And that card is going to double that wager. Basically, now you are gambling double the amount of points, because if you don't make it to 20 points, all of your points are going to be negative for that color. And if you've got a wager card, they're going to be doubly negative. However, if you manage to get over 20, then they're going to be doubly positive. Yeah. But you can put multiple wager cards down, so it can be triply bad or good if you want. But the trick to this game is that there is only one of every card in every color. So you are trying to work out, what does my opponent have in their hand? Does Maggie have the 10 in yellow, and am I really risking it by starting a run of yellow, or am I going to be lucky enough to draw that from the card pile? But it sounds really simple, but it gets really complex, because in the game you always have to play a card down and pick a card back up. You can pick a card back up from the discard pile of each of the colors, or you can pick a card up from the deck. And what that means is, when you don't want to take the risk and start a new color run, or you only have really high cards and they have to be played in ascending order, so you don't want to start with a 10 and then have nowhere to go, you need to discard a card into one of the discard piles that you're hoping your opponent doesn't need, because they are able to pick them up if it's something that's attractive to them. So if I put out a 5 red, then Maggie might be like, that's just what I was waiting for, because now I can start a run of red and know that I'm going to get over 20. So it really is a game that's all about gambling, kind of about push your luck, because if you start a run, you've only got 8 cards, so you can't be that sure most of the time that you're going to be able to really score a lot of points in that run, unless you have a good run of luck picking up cards out of the deck. It is fabulously clever in its execution. It's so simple to teach that the idea of it is so simple, but the layers that go into this game are so incredible.
It's very satisfying. I must say, this is probably one of the first 2-player-only games that we learned, like, way back when, and
we became hooked on.
And we've had it for a long time. And so it's an interesting one, because it is, there's very abstract, but I do appreciate all the colorful cards. That is enough to kind of keep me a little bit hooked and kind of going, which is great. And it's interesting, because when you were talking about it being like push your luck, I was like, oh, I never feel like it's push your luck, because I'm so risk averse that for me, I never kind of wait. Like, I'll never go to play it until I know it's fairly likely that I'm going to be able to get that 20.
I think most of the time you can be kind of certain, like you might have like 15 worth of points and you're like pretty sure that I can, throughout the course of the game get that extra card. So you're always trying to kind of weigh up the risk versus return. But I really like this game. I play it a lot on BGA, actually, probably more than I play my physical copy of the game. But I do love this game, and I will never not own this game. That is my number 4, Lost Cities.
Now, for my number 3. My number 3 is a little card game called Star Realms. It's a space game. I'm not usually, I'm known for not usually liking space themes, but this game is tiny, but it's powerful, and it just spaceshipped its way into my little heart so quickly. Like, I think it only took me a couple of games of this to go, I'm into this. Now, Star Realms is a deck building game where you're going to be essentially either using power cards to bring your opponent's health or power or health status down to 0, or you're at the same time you're going to be using coins or currency to purchase you hopefully more powerful cards to bring their demise about quicker, or to protect yourself from the incoming attacks. So it's a fairly straightforward concept, and it's probably, again, I'm not usually into that player versus player, like head-to-head type combat, and I don't know why. Like, I think it's because it's so straightforward. I just find it so satisfying to purchase those cards and go, oh, I can't wait for that to come around. Like, and in general, deck building is something that I really enjoy. I mean, this is probably the one game of all of my list where the artwork is not the thing that is attracting me to it. It's a very, spacey sort of artwork. It's fine, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. If anything, this was a game that the theme and the art kept us out of the game for a long time. But I would agree, even though it's not in my top 5, I would say, don't hesitate on this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really, really good.
It's so good, and it's so simple. And again, it's like, because all the different synergy. So again, all you're really doing is you're buying cards to build your deck, and then be able to play all of those cards, buy more cards, or and bring each other's health down. I find it so satisfying when you manage to string some of those cards that actually have synergies with some of their factions, and then all of a sudden you have a turn that is just completely devastating to your opponent, and it can kind of come out of nowhere. And for some reason, I really enjoy it in this one. And as a head-to-head,
yeah, it's really great. There's also a reskin of it called Hero Realms, which I think introduces a few other kind of elements. And of course, there are so many different expansions for this game.
There's so many, yeah.
But we just played the base game, and it's like such a tiny box, and it's so much game and so much fun for that. Like, for me, that is like, it gives that same feeling as like Dominion, like that same satisfying.
That was my gateway game, actually. Yeah, Dominion. Yeah. So I think it does. And it is very similar. You're right. It's like you're either, because in Dominion, you're either like getting coins so you can buy more expensive stuff in subsequent turns, or eventually trying to get those victory points. And in this one, it's just trying to get the attack power. But that's Star Realms, my number 3.
My number 3 is a game that went rocketing up my list when I first played it, and that is Paris, La Cité de la Lumière, or Paris, the City of Lights, which is by Jose Antonio Abascal. And this game is a game that captured me because of its mechanics. It is, and I just love feeling when something is unique and something just has these little kind of twists that are simple but just create so much tension in a game. And this game is tough in terms of like trying to win against your opponent. The game itself is played in 2 distinct phases. So the first phase, you are going to have this excruciating choice of placing a terrain tile down into the board. And also, can I just say, the board is the box itself.
That is so clever.
That's cool. So good. And I wish more games did that, but it's just so awesome because there's the perfect like area where you need to place the tiles. And so your choice is, you can either place one of these tiles, or you can pick up one of the polyomino tiles that you'll be using in the second phase instead. And why that is such an excruciating decision is because the map that you're building out is going to determine where you're going to be able to place those tiles in the second phase. So either you're building a map that is going to work for you, or you're getting tiles that are going to work with the map you've built. But if you give away what you're trying to build, the shapes that you're trying to build, then your opponent might take the shape. Or if you take a shape too early, they're going to not let you build that shape on the board. It's so difficult.
It's a lot of stress.
It's a lot of stress. Love it. I love stress. And the second part, or the second phase, is the placement phase. So now you are going to be able to place the polyomino tiles that you've collected in phase 1 down onto the board, but you can only place them on areas where it has your color or the neutral color. You cannot go over your opponent's color. That's why the first phase is so important. In the second phase, the excruciating choice is whether you place that and, get the most advantageous spots with all the neutral use of those the use of the neutral tiles, or you take one of the one-use only actions that are around the board instead that give you some powerful scoring advantage or some other extra action that you can take throughout the course of the game. So what I love about this game is not only in both phases, there's just an incredible, palpable amount of tension.
Yes. But a fair bit of anxiety.
A lot of
stress.
anxiety.
Yes.
But it relies so much on being able to predict what you think your opponent's going to do. So you're forced to kind of keep an eye on what polyomino tiles are they taking, what are they building out, and where might they go next? And do I have time to take that action before they do? Have they clocked that action? Have they realized this, potential? Love it.
This is a lot of non-solitaire energy
Love it.
that I really struggle with.
Love it.
That's why this is, it's your game more than it is mine. I really do love the artwork of it, though. The colorfulness of the components and how, you're trying, because it's the City of Lights, you're trying to place your pieces so that the lights are actually hitting your buildings.
Yeah.
The street lights are hitting your buildings. Otherwise, no one gets to see your wonderful building.
Yeah.
So I do enjoy those elements, and it just looks really pretty as well, like on the box and the components on top of it. So
yeah, this is a newer to me game. I've only discovered it in the last just probably year or so.
Yeah.
But I just absolutely adore it. Like it skyrocketed up the list. When I talk about it, I want it to be higher on the list. Like, it's my number 3, which is quite high, but I want it to be higher because I just appreciate the design so much. It ticks all of my boxes. I guess the reason why it's a bit lower is it doesn't get as much table time because, well, one, Maggie's not as much of a fan of the aggressiveness or the aggressive competitiveness of it.
not at all.
But the other thing is that it's a little more complex than some of the other games in terms of the rule set. So just like having the 2 phases, all the different actions which are actually variable from game to game. So there's a little bit more to it. It's a bit meatier, so it doesn't see as much table time. I do like my 2-player experiences to kind of be quick to get out to the table because they're an alternative to a bigger Euro experience usually. But this, great game. If you like head-to-head competition, check out Paris.
Polyomino tiles as well, like
That
polyomino
too,
shapes.
that too.
That's nice.
It's so great. Paris, la cité. I just wish it was easier to say. La cité de la lumière, the city of light.
Nice. My number 2 is a fairly new game.
It's a very new game. I'm so surprised by this.
I am surprised by this, called Radlands. There is so many things that everything should say that I shouldn't be into this, and yet I am drawn to it like a moth, or a thirsty moth to a watery tank of a flame. In Radlands, I'm thematically trying to string together some kind of metaphor.
That's not the saying.
Which I often also get
All
wrong.
the time.
All the
Yeah.
time I say the wrong idiom. But in this case, it was intentional, and it was referring to the theme of Radlands. In Radlands, we play as 2. It's a head-to-head game where we are actually playing as 2 opposing or rival camps in a post-apocalyptic world where the currency and the only thing that really matters, aside from survival, is water. And so in this game, you've got your camps that you're trying to protect, because this is where you're storing and keeping your water, and you're going to be recruiting and playing some of the different people who will have, different abilities, and trying to be very clever in the way that you use your water in order to but definitely attack. So use your people to attack the other camp and steal their water ultimately. But really, you're just trying to survive and be the first to destroy the other person's camps. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that it's like, well, this is head-to-head, it's combat. It's from I believe one of the designers has been involved in Magic the Gathering, and it is very kind of Magic the Gathering-esque, because you've got, your cards with particular sort of powers. The thing that I love about this, first and foremost, is the artwork. Everything about the world that's created with this, and this is the Kickstarter edition.
Yeah, it's just the deluxe edition.
The deluxe edition,
which houses the playmats is the main difference.
Which has these beautiful neoprene playmats, but there's so much artwork, even on the inside of the box. The cards themselves are really satisfying. So aesthetically, this game immediately, as soon as I kind of put it out on the table, it just draws me in. Even though combat and that head-to-head is not something that I'm usually into. And this is what I mean. It's not the combat. So the artwork is one thing. This whole, the multi-use cards, so the cards that you're recruiting or drawing and playing in front of you, they can either be played for, their particular, usually it's a person or a kind of like an event. When you play them as the person, they tend to have a particular special power or ability. You can also junk these cards for an additional benefit. So usually to play the cards or activate them, you're going to need to spend water. To junk them, you don't need to spend water. Water you need for absolutely everything. So you're going to be spending water to, again, reactivate cards a lot of the times, activate different events or raids that you're going to, again, mathematically, you put on this sequence sort of timer thing, and every round they move forward. To me, that's like you're in your camp and I can see your rebels coming up the mountain. And so what's great about that is that you have this impending disaster that's about to hit you, and you do have a little bit of time to try and mitigate, but sometimes you kind of look at what you've got and go, I'm just going to have to take that hit. But I love that it doesn't come as a surprise. Like the surprise is when it first gets sort of activated, but it's like it gives me enough time to psychologically prepare for what's coming. And thematically, it's kind of like I see the dust in the horizon. It's like, oh no, here come the, my rival rebels. So yeah, this is a game that I just truly, truly enjoy. I always lose and I still don't care. Amy always manages to destroy all of my camps without much of a fuss.
I know, but it's so I'm so surprised this is on Maggie's list, not only because it is a really, really new game that just came out this year, but also because it's quite aggressive. It's just head-to-head battle. It's like, I've just destroyed this person of yours.
I don't know what to say. I think, yeah, this is one where, again, remember how at the start I said aesthetic is one of the big things, and discovery. Because with those cards, there's that element of like, ooh, gambling, I have nothing to play, but I do have enough water to draw a card, and hopefully it'll give me something that I can either junk for something good, or that maybe I'll be able to use down the... So I feel like there's a lot of discovery. I love the artwork everywhere. And it just works for me. So that's my number 2, Radlands.
Now we're at our top 2, and so far there hasn't been any crossovers between our top 5. However, my number 2 happens to be Maggie's number 1, so I'm going to let her talk about that.
Yes.
And for now, I'm going to get straight into my number 1. So my number 1 2-player only game of all time up until this moment is Kahuna. I love this game. This is the kind of game that, when you're walking past your collection and you see it out of the corner of your eye and you feel like you get like the love heart emoji eyes. Good looking. I just love this game. Or when I'm looking at someone else's collection, they have it, I'm like, you see me. We have a connection instantly, and I'm going to talk to you now about, you have Kahuna. Let's talk about it.
It's compelled to talk about it.
I am, and I like to talk about it anytime 2-player games come up. Anyway, Kahuna. This game I love because it is so intensely competitive. It's quite mean, but it's just a lot of fun. Ultimately, I love this game because it makes me laugh, and I just have a good time. In this game, you are going to be either white or black, and you're going to have this pile of bridges available to you. And then there is a map of an archipelago or many different islands that you're going to be trying to connect using your little bridges. To do that, you need to play a card with the same name as the island in order to build one of your bridges. And when you have the majority of bridges around an island, you get to place a little ownership token on that island. And ultimately, this is an area control game where you're trying to own as many islands as possible. However, it gets a little more complicated and competitive than that, because your other option available to you other than building bridges is to destroy bridges. And you can do that by playing a pair of cards of the same island, allows you to remove a bridge from that island of your opponent's, or the 2 connecting islands, you can play a pair of the ones that are named in that connection, and you can also destroy their bridge. Right. But what is so brutal about this game is the timing in which you do this. So what can happen on your turn, you can actually play as many cards out of your hand or take as many actions as you want until you can no longer take any actions, or you decide to stop and draw a card. So you draw your card when you want to end your turn. But in this game, if you take over an island, your opponent's bridges get removed from that island. So if I take over one island, it might remove some connections that Maggie had to that island, which means she loses majority on another island, and she removes her token from that. And what can happen is the sequence of devastating effects for when you start to gain ownership, the other player is losing ownership, and it feels like the game can change really quickly between who has the majority. And the strategy in this game is really to hold the cards in your hand as long as possible until you have the right sequence of cards. So you want to be able to not just destroy a bridge and then let them rebuild it. You want to destroy a bridge when you have another card that allows you to build a bridge in that same spot and create this chaotic effect of consequences.
Yeah. Just total destruction and annihilation of that person's work up until that moment. It's how I feel when I play this game.
And that's how it feels. I taught this game at work to my colleagues, and they love to make sound effects when they blow up each other's bridge, just like and pull it off the board. And it is a bit like that, but it's also just really clever in the way it scores. In the first round, you can only get 1 point. In the second round, you can get 2 points for having the most islands. At the end, it's the difference between the two players. And I don't know. I love it. It's my number one. I will always play it with anyone.
Except for me, I don't tend to like to play it.
Except for Maggie.
Far too mean. I don't like that.
Maybe that's
sudden death, sudden devastation.
Maybe that's why I want to talk about it all the time, because I have nobody to play with. But
it's suppressed all the time. Yeah.
But I don't know. I really, really enjoy it. Some people think it's a little bit luck driven in terms of the cards that you pick up. But I think that's such a small part of it. There is a market of cards that you can choose from or choose to pick from the top of the deck. So you do have quite a few different options available to you. It does run a little long too, but because I enjoy every minute of it, it's just...
you don't care. You don't care about it.
No, I don't care. I really love it. And so that is our number one, and I'm happy to always have
your
a game
number
with
one.
You.
Clarification.
Oh, sorry.
Not our number one.
And that's the end of the video. That's our number one.
No.
Maggie. Sorry, that is my number one.
Yes.
Very strictly, not even in your top 6. So
No.
that is Kahuna.
And the final game, my number one, Amy's number 2, is Seven Wonders Duel. This is the dual or smaller 2-player version of Seven Wonders, the big box strategic game, which I quite enjoy. But in this version, you actually get to have a lot of those wonderful layery decisions, but in a very compact. And
I like it even more. I like Duel even more than Seven Wonders.
I like them the same, like they're my children. And I don't know if that's a lie that parents say I don't actually have children, but I feel like I like them the same. I do like the convenience of how portable this one is, and it's quicker to set up. I feel. But in Seven Wonders, we are leading or building our own civilization, and there's going to be, obviously, as any civilization, you're going to have to decide, where are you going to allocate your resources? Are you going to be big on architecture? Are you going to focus on science? Are you going to be military strong? And so that's going to be determining the types of cards and and also the strategy that we use or employ. Do you want to talk about the mechanics?
Well,
since it's your number
it is my
two
number
as
2,
well?
and it was a pretty close call, I have to say, and it's only because you heard how much I love Kahuna. Duel is so clever because of its pyramid draft. So the way that you're going to be drafting cards in this game is that some of them are going to be face up, some of them are face down in a pattern that you can observe, which means that you can kind of see a lot of the cards that are coming.
Yeah.
And when you are selecting cards, you are not only going to be thinking about, okay, if I take this card, it's going to give me this benefit. But also you're thinking about, if I take this card, it's going to give my opponent access to this other card that's really powerful. And so there's that constant, even in the drafting of the cards, there's this real what am I trying to do here with my strategy?
Yeah.
But then ultimately you're also trying to think about what am I going strong on? So at the beginning of the game, you definitely want to collect resources, but then you also can go strong on the military track, or you can collect cards that are just going to give you strict victory points at the end of the game. There's lots of different things that you can do, or the science cards, which you need to collect different symbols. So there's lots of different scoring conditions that you can aim towards, but ultimately you're going to have to be able to race your opponent for those cards, you also have to be able to pay for them. And money is really hard to come by in this game. And so when you draft a card, you either draft it by buying it to keep it in your tableau, or you're going to be burning it in order to get money to buy other cards. And that is a really tense decision that you need to continuously be making. I don't know, I love the tension in this game, but it's the first small box game that I ever played that really feels like a bigger box experience. And it's really hard to pinpoint why that is, but the way that all the parts come together really make it feel like that Euro kind of hit. So I'm not surprised it's your number one. And it's definitely like such a loved game by both of us. Because there's so many different angles that you can take to get points. So there's a bit of a point salad, and that's kind of fun. You've got these the wonders also that you're trying to build as well, and they give you really powerful one-off events and victory points too. But in order to build them, you need to again burn a card, and so it's just some like a lot of interesting elements. I love the military track because when you collect military cards, you get to play this tug of war game where you're moving this like military marker up to your opponent's end of the track, or
you're kind of invading, I guess, your opponent.
And along the way, they're going to lose coins if that gets further and further along. And if you make it all the way to the end, that ends the game immediately, and you actually win.
Taken over.
So it's kind of a mini game that you need to be a part of in order not to get conquered. But it's still like sidetracking you from your strategy. It's just a lot going on.
I actually love the resource management in it, because usually in the earlier stages of the game, you are building those buildings that give you those foundation resources that you're going to need to be able to acquire or pay for subsequent cards in other rounds. And so, and as you were saying, like with the money thing, the clever thing about it is if you don't have a resource, you can pay for it. But it's going to be more and more expensive depending on how many of that resource your opponent has. So again, if someone's gone really, really strong on, I don't know, clay, and the other one's just kind of left that behind, sometimes you're going to have to make a very tough choice of going, it's just not going to be worth for me trying to even build anything that has clay in it. I
was going to say the other thing that I love about it is the engine building element of when you have so say if you've gone strong on military, it has a symbol on the cards, just like in the original 7 Wonders, where later in the game, you're going to be able to build, like have synergies between later cards that are more powerful. You won't have to pay for them because you've already got the infrastructure there, or you've got that prerequisite card. That is going to allow you to build it for free. And so, there's just this, like everything about it is super satisfying. You always feel like you're like making great traction, even when you get beaten. It's like, oh, I really feel like I had something going there.
It just captured the beautiful magical soul of a strategic Euro in a very compact way. And we've played many of other games that have tried to kind of do a Euro-y sort of thing, and nothing ever feels the same. Like this is just, it's a wonder.
And for me, it is such a close call for this not being my number one. I do think this is a brilliant, brilliant design. And again, for me, it's just one of my important things about getting about 2-player games is getting it to the table more often, and this gets to the table slightly less often for me than Kahuna, so that was my ultimate decision. But I do love Jewel, and I love it because Maggie loves it, and it means that we get to play it together, which is a really nice thing to have as a couple, to have one game that you can, take anywhere and know that you're going to have a great time. So I'm not surprised that's your number one.
So that's my number one, your number two, and that's our last game for these best 2-player games. 2-player only games. We hope you enjoyed this list. If you did, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We do a lot of board game reviews, but we also do weekly series of Back Chat where we cover Kickstarter games, and Small Talk where we cover games like this in a more relaxed couch setting and talk about really all things board game related. And not even non-board game related.
And sometimes just life
random
related.
Life stuff as well.
But hope you enjoyed this list. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back with more videos soon. Bye for now.
Bye.